So, good afternoon and good morning, good evening. Welcome to the Agile Matrix podcast. They're near new and returning listeners. Thank you for joining us today. Now, in this episode, we're diving deep into the heart of the Scrum framework with none other than Matthias Orgler. Now, he is an Agile coach, a business innovator, and an eternal optimist. So do you know what? Get ready to embark on a journey of discovery as we unlock the secrets to mastering the core of Scrum. Yep, that's it, the core of Scrum. We're looking at the 5 events. So join us as Matthias brings his wealth of experience. Now, he has over 20 years experience in this field. So when I say wealth of experience, I really mean it. And his infectious enthusiasm to the table, guiding us through a dynamic conversation that promises to revolutionize the way you perceive and approach your Scrum events. So no matter your level of experience with Scrum, this episode is your ticket to unlocking the full potential of your Agile journey. So what I always tell you, grab your favorite beverage, grab your headphones, buckle up, and be prepared to be inspired as we embark on this exhilarating exploration of the Scrum events with none other than the one and only Matthias Orgler. So thank you, Matthias, for joining us today. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thanks for this introduction. It's great to be here. It's great to chat with you about Scrum, about agility in general, about all the things connected to that. Yeah, you said a lot of things already about me. So maybe for me, I've been doing this Agile stuff for more than 20 years now. I started with extreme programming back in the days. By training, I have a master in computer science and business administration, so went through all the stuff and worked in Silicon Valley for some time, way back in the days. And since then have been doing a lot of software development before, but then pivoted it to more Agile coaching. It kind of just developed. The first thing I wanted to just build great stuff. And from that, I thought, be a good coder. That's the first thing, be a software engineer. Yeah. I noticed that's not enough. You have a team around you, and that team needs to work together. This is kind of my extreme programming phase then. And then going up further, learning Scrum from Ken Schwaber, and then also going all the other parts like business models, market analysis, all the stuff, how you organize basically big Agile transformations for bigger corporations, because I just experienced that this is how you build great stuff, how you build a great company, great products, and get happy customers.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, you just scaled up building great stuff, from building great stuff to being the guy, from being the guy that actually does the coding, to helping the teams and the organizations, and so still building great stuff.
It just happens. If you want to build great stuff, you notice where it's lacking, and then you go there and you try to fix it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. So now, like you said, you mentioned something that I hope our listeners picked, which is you were trained by Ken.
Yes, I had the honor to have him, as helping me to kind of understand Scrum for the first time. Yeah.
Wow. I wish I had that opportunity, but nah, not my experience. But that's fantastic. So how was he?
He's also a great facilitator. I mean, he did it very well, the facilitation with the exercises and all that. It really, there are episodes still stuck in my head, like stories he told, stories we went through, things he made us do and fail at, so that it's really the emotional momentum it's really in me. It's it's stored there through the emotion that he created. So he's a brilliant facilitator as well.
Wow. Now, listeners, in case you're wondering, we're talking about Ken Schwaber, the co-founder of Scrum. So not Ken, your neighbor. No. Ken Schwaber, the co-founder of Scrum. Matthias actually trained under him for his Scrum Master training. So when I say we're bringing people that actually have handled this stuff, Matthias is one of them. So thank you, Matthias, for that. So now you said you were trained by Ken. So that means, and I attended your webinar, you mentioned the fact that you've been doing this for over 20 years. So how has it been? How are the highs and the lows? What can you tell us about 20 years of experience doing this stuff?
Oh yeah, maybe a little history. That's always fun. If I think back when I started this, as I said initially, from the point of extreme programming, and as a software engineer, I learned about test-driven development back then. I was skeptical at first, like most people. Thought, why would you test software? But then quickly experienced it, and now there's no way back. I never want to work any other way. And I cannot accept software engineers who don't do it or don't at least try it. So, and back in that time, I was driven by building great products. It's not about making someone agile. It wasn't back then. 15 years ago. It wasn't, companies weren't hiring me for making them agile. They were hiring me to fix a problem. There was a problem, maybe with software delivery, the speed of features rolling out, it slowed down, and they wanted that fixed. They didn't care how I did that. In fact, when I mentioned agility or anything to the companies or to the clients back then, they wouldn't hire me. Because they thought this is crazy stuff. 2 guys in a garage can do that, but it's not
snake oil.
a serious company. And then so we went in and fixed things, and it worked from there. And often just more taking a Kanban-like approach. So start where you are with what you know. So remodeling the process they had, then kind of iterating over that, thinking where are bottlenecks, what could we improve, and then suddenly something emerged that looked a lot like Scrum. We just didn't tell them, and or we told them afterwards. I said, okay, this by the way is called Scrum, and these things have this name, what you are doing. And they said, it's called what? Okay, forget it. It's not important how you call it. It's important that you do it, and you arrived there. And this changed over the years. Then we were all hoping, like we were a kind of a small group of people doing this agile stuff and doing this radical new thing. It didn't feel like such a small group, but yes, it was. Yeah, as I said, the companies wouldn't hire you for that if they even knew about it. And then it became more mainstream. And we thought, yeah, we are successful. People understand that it's working. Companies show that it's working. So now people finally accept this stuff. And then, of course, comes the curse of something going mainstream. It was people twisted it in strange ways, how they wanted it understood. And then we got into the realm where you are hired to make a company agile, which is... I get these things. People hire me to make them agile.
By a set date. By this day.
By a certain date. And they have a certain understanding of what agile is. So the first 2 things I need to do when someone does that today, I need to ask them, what is agile to you? What does that mean to you, and why do you want it? And then what do you want to achieve with that? What do you expect from becoming agile? Because becoming agile in itself could not be the goal. And then we get into very fruitful discussions. Sometimes clients say, we don't hire you because we just wanted, I don't know, someone to just, we wanted that label, agility, maybe to attract more talent or whatever sometimes. And for other clients, then we go into a real fruitful discussion where they understand that their understanding might be not complete of what agility is and what it takes to get there. I mean, you also have been doing this stuff for a decade or longer. So we go in, and it's not only the monetary cost that they pay us, but it's also, they need to change. Like, they need to change their culture, their behavior often. And this is, many clients are not prepared to do that when they only go in with, oh, let's make us agile, and then everything's going to be faster and cheaper or something. So this has definitely changed the way, and also by that it has changed that back then teams, developers, engineers, designers, they all embraced that idea. Yes, we can make the decisions, we can influence, we can decide how we work. It's a lot about the motivation through autonomy, like in the Dan Pink in Drive.
Yeah.
So it was great for the people. It was a grassroots movement, and management was opposing it. And today it's the opposite. It's management asking for what they think is agility. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know, and then they oppose it onto people without asking them. And then I have the teams. They impose it. And the teams oppose that thing and don't want to do it. And then I stand there with the people who formerly propelled agility forward and demanded it, now going against it and saying, I don't want this agile crap.
Yeah.
And they often have past experience with, we might call it fake agile, or just things that were labeled agile and weren't really, just using the names. And so that has been a different part of the of the agile coach discipline, to help people unlearn the wrong understanding of agile before you can then start and then show them also why it might be beneficial to them.
It's very true, very powerful, and thanks for sharing that. I had a recording with one of a professional Scrum trainer, Sam, and he mentioned something that I gave him some scenarios, and he said, these scenarios that I've described, this is where Scrum is done badly. And that's why in conversations that he's had with some developers, they do not want to do Scrum. They don't want to do Agile. And he's found out in talking to them that what they said they were doing wasn't Agile or Scrum. And like I told someone some time ago that for a lot of organizations, a lot of the staff there, Agile for them is what has been done to them. They don't see themselves as being participatory. It's just management coming in. And there's something you said that just struck a nerve. Management hire us and they say, come, Matthias, go and make them agile. They don't think they're part of it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So they just say, make the teams agile, but then all the decisions come back to them and they go, no. So yeah.
Yeah, right. And there is, as you said, it's also the, where I talked about the 5 Scrum events, the talk. This is kind of all describing the fake Scrum. This kind of painting the Scrum terms onto basically the old process. And this is then what many people, for them, it's a first contact with Agile terms, with Scrum terms. And then, of course, they think this is crap. And I can only, when we do this conversation with people who have that experience, I can only tell them they are right to hate it. It's, yes, that was crap what you did, but it wasn't the Scrum or it wasn't Agile at all. But of course, that's more difficult if the term is already burned and you have to kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And then, okay, now you mentioned Scrum events. So there are 5. So in your mind as an Agile coach, if I was imagine me as a business executive, I've called Matthias and Matthias says, okay, now let's do the events. And I go, what events? Is it someone's birthday? What are you talking about? How would you convince me as an executive that the events are a good investment in time for a team?
Of course, we can skip all the coaching basics that you first observe and learn what their circumstances are, why they do things they do now, not come in blazing and tell them, oh, that's all wrong, I'm going to tell you how to do it differently. Accept that, because there might be a reason that's not immediately obvious why they do certain things. That's much better than to just wipe everything clean, because that's not the idea. And then I would go, or common objections I hear are, oh, with Scrum we have so many meetings. And with meetings they mean the Scrum events. The Scrum events are more supposed to be workshops, most of them, rather than meetings. So it's not someone presenting something, you're sitting on your butt, on your chair and listening, but it's a workshop, it's working session. That's the idea. And then if you look at the Scrum events and you do the calculation, about 10% of the total time the team has are the 4, let's say, real events. the planning, the daily Scrum, the review, and the retro. And then almost 90% are there to work. Just work. That's called sprint. To work.
Yeah.
And this is a much better ratio than most teams have under other approaches. They usually have like 50% of their time in meetings or more sometimes. So now you have 90% free to work. And of course, there will be other meetings outside of what Scrum has with the events. So it might not be 90%, it might be 80%, but it's still much better than anything else. So it lets you focus on work. And the next thing also to counter that argument is, or not to only counter the argument, to actually fix it in the real world, is don't add the Scrum events on top of your existing meetings. That's not the idea.
Yeah.
The idea is that when you use the Scrum events in the Scrum framework, or also similar other Agile methods, it's supposed to replace a lot of the stuff you already have.
Yeah.
So if you have other meetings where you meet with your customers, with stakeholders to synchronize and that might all go into the sprint review. Then the sprint review hopefully is not just let's check the progress of the team meeting, but it's really a session to gather feedback from stakeholders, from customers, to let them know about the progress, but also gather feedback to change our plan. And once you do that, you can reduce your meetings by a lot. And then, so this is just to counter that one argument. And then I would say Scrum, there is one thing that I start all my Scrum trainings with is the expectation about Scrum. I've seen many teams and whole companies expecting now Scrum is coming in telling us how to work differently. So they think, okay, now we don't need to do anything. Scrum is going to tell you what to do. And that is not true, because Scrum is Ken Schwaber is very pedantic on calling it a framework for a reason, because it's not telling you what to do. It's just a framework where you can hang your processes. You need to know how to do your work. You need to be the professionals. That's a big part of agility, to trust the people who do the work, that they know best how to do the work. So Scrum is just for me, it's just a set of checkpoints, measurements that you can use to then optimize your own process, but it will not tell you what to do. It will just help you to detect problems and to frequently adapt.
Very true, very true. Thanks for that. So as we were talking, one question came to my mind, and as I was thinking about it, I was laughing in my head, and I was thinking, so you have the events in front of you. So I was like, let me ask Matthias, of all the events, what's your favorite event and why?
I've been told that it's like Ken Schwaber will speak to you when I say that. It's not. I haven't noticed that. It's so deeply ingrained for me that I actually thought it was my own opinion, but it seems to have been planted by Ken. I checked the materials from back then and talked to people, and they said, yes, this is Ken Schwaber's. To me, it's the retrospective. This is the single most important event.
Okay.
The reason for that is, if you have none of the other events, and you start only with a regular retrospective, you do that every week or every 2 weeks, the other events will emerge from that. Mostly. This is what I told about where I did that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. This is what I did with companies, actually, with the teams. I did retrospectives, and then the rest emerged, and then kind of something like Scrum or something similar or something different emerges. And this is why it's so important. And sadly, the retrospective is often the first thing that goes out the window for many teams who try Scrum. I'm sure you've seen those memes on LinkedIn when they say no time to, but you see someone trying to tell somebody, oh, change that. I think I saw one. They were pushing a cart,
and the tires were block tires, so they're square.
Yeah.
And the guy stood with a circular one and said, "Oh, you need to," and the guy's preacher said, "No, we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
We don't have
We
time
have
to
work to do. No time for that.
And it's so true. For me personally, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I've always been stuck between the two, the daily scrum and the retrospective, for the same
Oh,
reason.
interesting. Mm-hmm.
The daily scrum, why I love daily scrum so much is I like the strategy mentality it brings to the team. And if done properly, it changes the team from being a feature, no, I won't say feature factory, but for, like we say in Kanban, stop starting and start finishing. Mm-hmm. So if you do your daily scrum proper, the team are focused on finishing work every day. So it guides them towards actualizing the sprint goal. That's how I look at it. And then personally, I'm an improvement kind of guy. I'm always looking at what can I do better. So even on this podcast, I have my weekly retrospective of myself to say, okay, that needs to change. That needs to change. That needs to get better. So I also look at the team, expecting adapting their process of work and improving that as well. So that's what I think you strike a very powerful point, which is, I mean, you said it so, and that it just shows your experience. You said it so casually, but so that means a Scrum Master starting with a team. You get to an organization, they want to introduce Scrum, they're very new to it. What's the best way to start about it? And you just said it right now, which is start with retrospective at the very least. And then you can, like Sam said, you can look at the Scrum as a map and as a guide. Mm-hmm. So, you can start with the retrospective, knowing that eventually you're going to have to pull out the daily Scrum, but you can pull them from the retro, where it becomes an answer to a problem at the retro surfaces. To go, there's no way for us to keep on track of what we're doing daily. There's a daily Scrum. Let's pull that out. So the events become answers to the problems that they note at the retrospective. So that's really powerful. Thanks for that.
Exactly.
Thanks for that.
And I like how you talk about the daily Scrum. I mean, I've always also seen that as an underrated event that also many teams skip. Like it goes right after the retrospective, like stuff they skip. It was so that years ago I even wrote an entire book with 100 pages about the daily Scrum, because I've seen so many. Sure, you as well have seen so many bad daily Scrums. It easily degenerates into kind of like status reporting. Oh yes, management. Yes, I did my work. I deserved my salary yesterday. This again goes back to the view of the human being. This assuming positive intent, the culture, what you assume about other people. Management in some traditional companies assumes that people, if you don't check on them and if you don't give them work, they will not work. But that has been disproven. I mean, the first experiments about intrinsic motivation were in the 1950s. Yeah. So it's not that people are lazy by nature and trying to avoid work, but this is still in much of the management theory and the management processes. Even if the managers themselves wouldn't support that, but it's still in the hierarchy and in the process and in how people are promoted and how performance is measured. It's still in there. And then these daily Scrums easily degenerate into this status report, which provides no value to the team. And then the team, rightfully so, says, oh, let's get rid of that daily Scrum. But there's an alternative to getting rid of it. It's to fix it, to turn it into something that's actually valuable for the team.
Very true. Yeah, because if it's done wrong, it becomes like an exam, right? It's a report card day, and nobody likes report card day. No.
If we trust people, if management trusts the employees, then there is no reason to ask them what the progress is or something. You can check the progress in your Jira or whatever you have, and you don't. And if they don't make progress fast enough according to the initial plan they had, then there's probably a reason. And the reason is likely not that people are lazy. The reason is likely that there are unforeseen problems coming up. They have to deal with it. Maybe you can help them. So be a servant leader and ask, what can we do to help you?
Support.
Don't assume, don't blame people, and don't make people feel forced to kind of report that they were busy and that they did the best they could despite it not working out. And this is not the culture and the view of the human being that we want to have in an agile culture. And once that all falls away, we can, all these political games, then we can just focus on the work. And this is what happens in successful agile companies.
Yeah, very, very true. Very, very true. Very, very true. So in your experience with the events, what will you say in terms of, so how like you know, so obviously you mentioned something about fixing the events. So in the last 20 years you've been doing this, what strategies, obviously you can't answer every single scenario, but I'm saying if you're going to say one single strategy that you have used that has worked when it comes to optimizing events, what would that strategy be?
Maybe if we stick with the daily Scrum,
Okay.
there are simple strategies, and there's a lot in that book. But main strategies I would see is, first of all, as a Scrum Master, try not to be the center, the focus of everything. If everyone is talking to you, try to remind them to talk to each other. Also, people constantly recommend, and I support this, to walk the board. To not go person after person, but go story after story. Also make sure that usually stories are cross-functional, so multiple people should work on a story. It shouldn't be that story is yours and that is yours, because then you're not a team anymore.
Yeah.
And also, occasionally as a Scrum Master, stay away from the daily Scrum. In the office, that was always nice. I was kind of like looking at them from afar and not going there and seeing whether they had the impetus to get up and do it themselves. Because that gave me an information as a Scrum Master. Is it already valuable for them? Because if they don't get up and they just think, oh, no daily Scrum, what a great day, then we still have to work on making it valuable for them. It's by the team, for the team.
You said something very interesting there. I read someone's LinkedIn post the other day, and she mentioned the fact that her team, she doesn't always join daily Scrum, but usually there's, I think the product owner and lead engineer usually run the daily Scrum, run it. So on this day, both of them were in there. So she went to where they're having daily Scrum, and after 5 minutes, she had to ask the team, so what are we doing? Because they're waiting for those people to kick it off. Then she realized from there, like you said, that that's a coaching moment, because they obviously didn't see the value. It was more like they had to, like what you said earlier, I'm at work, I need to be here because of my calendar. If I'm not here, there's going to be trouble. So I've come to the event, let the person run the event, I can go back to my work. But then she realized how to coach them to understand the importance of the event and the fact that it's a team working session and all that.
Yeah, and it should shift then after some time, so that people become responsible, feel responsible for their own time and productivity. So that if they say no, or this is valuable for me, or this is not valuable for me, this is a self-management. Like, know where your time is best spent, where your skills are now best spent. Don't let a manager or an anonymous process tell you that. This is the first thing in the Agile Manifesto. Don't let a process tell you that. It's about, what do you think? And it takes time for many teams who are not used to that, to taking responsibility for their own time and productivity, to get back into that. But it feels so amazing once you can do that, and it's so much easier because decisions are quicker. It's all the benefits of agility that we get then. Okay. And it's also a thing outside even of Scrum, that people, for example, become more responsible when they sit in a meeting. So in an agile environment, or in a non-agile environment, when you're invited to a meeting, you're CC'd there, you will sit there, you will sit out the meeting, you will think, oh, what a boring thing, I could work now. And you play a little game on your phone, and then you go out. But in an agile environment, in an agile company, you will even decline the invitation, and tell them to call you if they really need you. Or when you sit in that meeting and you notice, okay, I'm not adding value, I'm not getting value, I'm just going to get up and get out.
Yeah.
And if you have a nice culture, like the right view of the human being, no one's going to judge you for that. Everyone is going to assume positive intent. They are going to assume that you know that you can bring more value elsewhere.
Okay.
And so you do that, and you don't rely on the manager to kind of release you from the meeting.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's a level of maturity that, and because when you think of it, if there's cross-functional team self-managing, then it means they can actually do. When I use the word do anything to indicate the fact that there's now no limitation to how far they can go.
Yeah, nice.
Because those are the two limiting factors, right? Does the team have all the skills required to deliver a potentially reusable increment? One. Then two, is the team self-managing to determine how they do what they need to do?
Yeah.
Because if they get a value proposition from the product owner, it's the team's impetus to decide how to fulfill the value proposition. And if they have the power to do that, then there's no stopping them. I always tell people, okay, now I won't say that story. This is
I also liked your the episode on product owner, where you emphasize that it's about basically stating you need to frame and state the problem, and then let the team figure out the solution. Don't tell them the little tiny steps to take to build a solution. Then you could build it yourself, frankly. So it's exactly that. Give them the space and trust them to do that.
Yeah, thanks for that. So you heard that Matthias mentioned the Pakova podcast episode before about the product owner. So if you haven't listened to that, go to that. Okay. So now there's one of the events that I enjoy. I enjoy all the events, but there's one that I've always looked at and I wonder about it a lot, especially in the space in the UK. So the sprint planning. Now, looking at the Scrum guide and all the years and all that we've been doing sprint planning, there are usually two parts of it, which is what we're going to do and how we do it. So it's a generally planned to be a long meeting. But I dare say that in my experience, I haven't seen any organization that would accept a planning meeting for more than an hour. Right? So in my experience, I've used the refinement meeting as a way to do part of the planning in terms of understanding the tickets and breaking them down. And maybe even if you get to companies that estimate, don't get me started there, but just let them estimate as they choose to, and then come into the sprint planning to look at capacity, look at the value proposition. So how do you do it? Because if we're to follow the Scrum guide, particularly, we'll have a lot of very unhappy teams and companies. So how do you navigate that? How do you do it dynamically, knowing that at least most of the Western world, that time constraint of an hour still holds the sprint planning to that? How do you do it?
Yeah, I love your approach. I think this is exactly the right way to do the refinement, which is not a Scrum event on purpose, because you don't need to do that every sprint. In reality, or in practice, it's often done like a full event. It's done every sprint. But technically, it's not necessary to do it all the time, because you don't want to have a too long detailed backlog, because that makes you inflexible on Agile again.
Yeah.
In early iterations of the Scrum guide, there was also a sprint planning 1 and 2. It was divided into sprint planning 1 and 2.
I remember.
Which, it was about what are we going to do, and then how are we going to do it.
And then how are we going to do it? Yeah. In fact, I remember the Scrum guide, it mentioned that there will be a break in between. Then you come back to do sprint planning 2. Yes. Oh, wow.
And in many years ago, very early on, I tried that, and I noticed it didn't feel right. For some teams, it was okay, but many teams, they didn't need to split work into tasks. Some do, some don't. Most teams I've experienced do not need to split it into tasks. They do it on the fly in their heads. For some teams, it helps. So that was basically the part of the second part of the sprint planning. And today, for me, a successful and great sprint planning can often be over in 10 minutes. That requires that you do the team already knows about what's coming. What's the goal? What's coming? They talked in the refinement. They talked through the user stories. They have a rough understanding of how to implement that, how they want to approach it. They have a rough understanding of whether it fits the sprint, whether they can do it, and how much they can do it. So the sprint planning is essentially just, okay, who's on vacation, who has training, who's available, what's the past velocity, do we think that fits, okay, we know everything, oh, there's a last minute story that came in, let's briefly discuss that, and then we get the package ready, and that's it. So it can technically be over in just 10-15 minutes. It doesn't have to, but if you prepare everything.
Exactly.
And these long, tedious sprint plannings, I mean, they suck the energy out of you. I've had sprint plannings for 2-week sprints that lasted 4 hours, and that's exhausting. And nobody is motivated after that to start working. And usually not everything is ready. So yeah, and if you just start the refinement basically, and the product owner starts telling the team, the rest of the team about the stories and what it's about, the questions come back. I mean, that's the basic part of the refining stuff, is that you have the communication going on, that back and forth. The estimation is also just to trigger, or for me, it's mainly to trigger conversations and questions.
Yes.
And then you have that back and forth, and then once everyone has kind of a similar understanding, you can agree on a goal, then you go. But during these questions, sometimes the product owner cannot ask a question. They need to do some research, or the developers need to do some research. They need to figure out, let's kick the tires of that library quickly to see if it's even feasible for that. And you cannot do that ad hoc in the sprint planning. You need a day or two more. So this is why the refinement usually is a few days before that, so that you have time to maybe even talk to the customer and ask them, because you realize that you don't have a deep enough understanding of what they need.
I mean, that makes sense. That's the reason why even the Scrum guide lists it clearly as a complementary practice, right? Because I think we've realized that it helps I always tell people that it makes the sprint planning livable.
Yeah.
Because you're like, 45 minutes in, you can already see the energy in the room is going.
Yeah.
It's going. Yeah, it's like going down. Okay. Thanks for that. So there's a question I wrote here that I actually want to be sure that I capture properly. So I said here that, how can organizations foster a culture of continuous improvement via the Scrum events? How would you suggest that? And I think we've touched on it, but I want to bring that question out properly and have you answer it succinctly.
Yeah. I mean, we already talked about the retrospective being the engine. And as you said, and I agree with that, the daily Scrum also tying into that, because this is also when you look at what came out of the retrospective. Are we actually doing this? Are we making progress? Do we have to adapt on a daily basis? And I just wrote an article this week about the retrospective and how to turn that from the thing that I see very often, which is a problem discussion meeting, turn it into something that's really effective and is really the engine of continuous improvement. And so that I wrote about that in my newsletter, in the Agile Compass, and it basically states lists the template that I've been using. It's not something that you need to use in each and every retrospective, but it's something that I've learned over the years that kind of makes sense to touch on these points in a regular retrospective. Okay. And there are a few key aspects for me. The first one is start the retrospective with looking back at the last retrospective.
Yeah.
I see that not happening in 90% of the retrospectives.
Mm.
Like, start, what did we decide to do, to change in the last retrospective? Did we actually do it? No judgment if we didn't do it. Sometimes we just get assuming positive intent, right? It's nobody's fault. And if we did it move the needle? Did it change what we wanted it to change? And then you decide, are we going to keep it? Are we going to continue the experiment because we don't have data yet? Sometimes it takes longer than a sprint to see whether something is working. Or do we throw it out and maybe try something different? And that first thing helps to make it continuous, so that it's not every time you talk about problems, you think about improvement and then nothing happens. But you really go into that, and you use this empirical process that Scrum so emphasizes. This look at the data. Did it actually change something? Did it do something? And then go from there. Don't just think up great improvement ideas and then don't know if someone asks, did it actually change anything? We don't know. If kind of, I don't know. That's the first step. And then there are little steps that I usually use. It's just help people jog their memory, because you have the recency effect. They always remember yesterday better than what happened a week ago in the sprint. There are several techniques we can use. And then get into the problems, like the typical what went well, what didn't go well. Don't just go into problems, but sometimes people just have ideas, experiments. Let's try that. I think that could improve something. It doesn't always have to start with the problem. And then quickly move away from the problem. Because the retrospective is not a problem discussion meeting. The retrospective is an improvement meeting. So you wanna improve things. And now I'm saying meeting, although it should be a workshop. Sorry, sorry, Ken. So you want to focus on the improvement. So from what you got, sometimes we do a root cause analysis, because the problems we see often are just symptoms. Yeah. So it's when you go to the doctor and you're coughing, they don't treat that symptom. They try to find the root cause and treat the disease. Yeah. And that helps. Sometimes the mood is too negative to do that. So kind of have to read the room. And then you quickly go to, what can we do to improve that? And going along, like there are a lot of things that I think are help to make a retrospective really effective. And that's the flare and focus approach, or the diamond approach, where you will likely come up with lots of problems. And before you continue, focus, narrow down again. Focus on one, two, or three most important ones. I use dot voting a lot. Let people vote on that. And then you find improvement ideas. Again, you narrow them down after the initial brainstorming phase. And then don't end with the improvement ideas. That's another critical point for me for the retrospective, because these improvement ideas are often pretty general and lofty. Like, we should improve our testing, our automated testing. I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Yeah. Or we should have better communication. That's not enough, because that's not actionable.
Just aspirational. Yeah,
right. Derive actions that you can actually do. Okay, let's I don't know, we agree not to interrupt each other between 9 and 12 because this is our deep work time. Or if you want to interrupt me, I have an hour where we can reach me between lunchtime or something. Or testing, yes, from now on we will till the end of the next sprint, we will set up a test runner here, or write at least 3 test cases or something like that. Make it specific, and make it so that you can do it in the next sprint. And then it kind of continues from there. Okay, in the next retrospective, you will look back at these action items. Again, limit that to, my rule of thumb is 3 action items, not more. You have work to do, and it will overwhelm you. So small steps, but continuously, is much better than a big step occasionally.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's so true. So true. There's a mathematical equation I saw the other day about one, I think it's one raised to the power something and then 1.01 to the same factor. And the difference in what you get is so much. So like you said, little improvements, they go a long way.
Right.
So one question here. So now you've been in the game 20 years plus. If you were to look back, if you were to fly back in a time machine to meet you 20 years ago, what will you tell yourself?
I just read an Arthur C. Clarke novel about where they cannot go back into time, but they can look back at their former selves.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is always hilarious because we tell ourselves these stories over and over again, and it has nothing to do with the facts in many cases. I don't know if I really want to go back. But yeah, so I think what a problem that always faces people when they are younger is they're often not confident enough in what they know. And also with this Agile thing, if you get started with it, yes, you tread carefully and you're a little timid, but be courageous. Try things. Don't be afraid to fail. And probably I would have told myself that that Miles Davis quote more often, that about it's not the note that you play that is the wrong note. It's the note you play afterwards that makes it wrong or right. And don't be afraid of mistakes. Fail forward. It's a learning opportunity. I was far too concerned with, and many people around me, I see that still, I would help people understand that, is how do I look? What do other people think of me when I try something? Another article that I had on my newsletter on the Agile Compass was about a study about goalkeepers in a penalty shoot, how they react, because the best chance to catch a penalty is to just stand in the middle of the goal, because this is where 40% of the shots actually land. Wow. This is what a study found, and you hardly see any goalkeepers stand in the middle. They always dive to the right and left. And the question is, why? Are they stupid? Don't they know statistics or something? Yeah. And it turns out they are smart people, but it's how other people view them that's important. Because if you stand in the middle and the ball sails left or right and you did nothing, people assume you are not motivated, you are lazy, you are not supporting the team.
Yeah.
So if you free them of that perception, if you make sure that you are in a team, in a company, in an environment where you know, no matter what you do, people will assume that you have positive intent. Then you are free to make the right choice, independent of what others think. So you can experiment, you can fail without having to defend yourself. And that's probably something that I would have told myself. It's something I still tell myself.
It's
so hard.
Powerful. Yeah, because you hit the nail on the head deep. Because a lot of times we think about, because when you look at imposter syndrome, it boils on the same thing. We're looking at how they view us in what we do. So we think we need to step up to a certain level to represent what we think they think of us. Wow. Okay, so one last question. So there's a Scrum Master watching us right now. Either a year into it, either a year into it, just starting, about to start, 5 years in, 10 years in, 15 years in. If they had 5 minutes with you, what would you tell them? What's that one thing you will tell them that, okay, hear ye, Scrum Master?
Wow, that's a hard one, because I talked to many Scrum Masters and it was always something different in their context. what kind of held them back.
Yeah.
First thing I would make sure is, are you comfortable with being a Scrum Master, or are you actually a project manager wanting to enter the Agile game? Because a Scrum Master is very different from a project manager. It's totally different, and it's often, people who don't know often think that Scrum Master is kind of the Agile project manager.
Red hat.
Yeah, but it's not. It's something totally different. Project management is handled totally different in Scrum. There is no single person doing that. So that's the first thing. And I always ask Scrum Masters, and I would ask you as a Scrum Master, what do you want to do? What's your passion? Scrum Masters nowadays, I see them often, they get into the position into the role without actually knowing what it is, because someone asks them or pushes them, or hey, now we don't have team leads anymore, now you have to be a Scrum Master, go do that certificate.
Yeah.
So only afterwards is it that they try to understand what that role actually is. So what I ask you first is, what's your passion? Is your passion more to create great products, work with customers, build business models? Then you might want to pivot to become a product owner or a product manager. A product owner is just the role a product manager has on a Scrum team. Just to clarify that, it's not different things. And if you like to serve people, if you like to enable them to be better versions of themselves, to support them, then go on with the Scrum Master role. Don't focus too much on the technicalities, on, oh, did I get the names right, the terms right, or did I do we do that everything by the book? Don't focus on that. There's too much focus on this. There's 90% of the focus is often on the process and framework, but actually that's the smallest part of what you need. Focus on what do you want to do, and then help the team, support them in that they can do great work, and they are motivated.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that. So now, in your conversation, you mentioned the Agile Compass. So tell us about the Agile Compass and how we can actually get on.
Oh, the Agile Compass. Yeah, I suppose you can find a link in the show notes then.
Yes.
About the Agile Compass. This is a free newsletter that I'm sending out every week with my experiences. And it's not only about Scrum, it's about agility in general. So it goes way beyond. And it digs deeper. It's not just this is how this framework works, or this framework works. This is frankly is boring to me. I even touch on that sometimes, but it's going into the deeper stuff, into what makes agility really work, and techniques how to make it work. So for people who want to do this, Agile practitioners. And it's just a free newsletter, a weekly one, so you can sign up and
So for our viewers, the link will be on the screen and also in the description. Now, before Andreas goes, he's trying to escape, but you also have an Agile coach program that you run. Can you tell us about that? How can someone sign up for it and all that? Can you tell us about that a bit?
Yeah, it's actually starting. Currently, it's a 6-month program. So it sounds long, but it's basically one evening a week, one weekend session a month. So it's designed so that you can do it, with a regular job in mind. And the Agile Coach program, the Agile Coach Education program is, I designed that. I get pushed into that basically by the community, because they asked, where can I learn all that stuff you are telling here in live sessions, in articles, in posts, because they couldn't find that in any other education programs for Agile coaches. Most of them, and then connecting to what I just said, many of them focus on frameworks, on technicalities. They
Yeah.
teach you, this you have to know all the frameworks as an Agile coach. No, it's nice if you know them, but there are more important parts. It's what I said about the view of the human being, assuming positive intent. All the psychological techniques you have to use to understand why people have certain behaviors and have a hard time letting go of them, even though intellectually they might know that it's not beneficial to them. Once you understand key psychology elements, you can understand why people do that. I even love the people who oppose an agile transformation the most. Because with all that background, I now understand that they are actually the most agile people without knowing. So they have good intentions. They don't want to hurt you. They don't want to tell you agile is bad. They just want the best for the company, for the product, for the customer. This is actually insane agile thinking. And all these psychological techniques, the cultural aspect, the human aspect, but also the technical aspect, like the hard technicality, how to make agile possible in hardware manufacturing, how to make agile possible in software, which still is not commonplace everywhere. These are parts of that program. I focus on that rather than, yes, we touch on the frameworks, but this is just a tiny part. The main part is what makes agility really work.
Okay, fantastic. So as you're watching right now, you will see the link on the screen, and also in the show notes, you see the link to his Agile Coaching Education Program. So Matthias rather comes with a wealth of experience, over 20 years. Don't forget what we said earlier. He actually trained with Ken Schreiber, the co-founder of Scrum. So he knows what he's talking about. And I've actually had a look at the program. It is extensive. So what can I say? Do you have any other question? Let me see. Okay, no. Thank you so very much for coming in. Thank you for sharing your ideas, your thoughts, your experience. And you give us a couple of really powerful nuggets regarding the retrospective, the daily Scrum, Agile itself, even your experience, and even the 20-year advice that we made you go back in time to give yourself. So thank you so very much for coming on the Agile Matrix podcast, for sharing your ideas. Thank you for taking the time. And to our listeners, dear listeners, so before you go, remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. So either be Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, whichever one. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned to future episodes of the Agile Matrix podcast. Remember, we've only just started. This is week number 3, I think. So you don't want to miss out on the exhibition insights and expert guests that await you. So join us on this thrilling journey of continuous improvement, innovation, and agile mastery. Subscribe now and let's continue this adventure together. So until the next time, keep embracing change, stay agile, and never stop optimizing. Remember, this is the Agile Matrix podcast where innovation meets agility. Thank you very much.